In this clip, we're going to take a look at how we can produce our curves outside of the hair system and then still have them become part of our hair system. So as an example, I've created a bunch of curves inside of ZBrush using FiberMesh. Now using ZBrush and FiberMesh is outside of the scope of this course. However, there are many great courses available on Pluralsight in both ZBrush as well as using FiberMesh in ZBrush. But anyway, I've gone ahead and exported those curves out here. You can see there's a whole bunch of them over there. And I did actually come in here and rebuild them, meaning that I selected all the curves, went over here to my modeling menu, curves, and I used this rebuild option so that I could rebuild all of them so they all had 6 spans, so they were all fairly even. Other than that, they're all just individual curves, no different than if I drew each curve manually. So I want to go ahead and create these into a hair system. So to do that, we actually have a tool available to us here under the Effects tab under NHair, and it's right here. It's called Make Selected Curves Dynamic, and it's exactly how it sounds. It can make any curve dynamic. Now, before I go ahead and jump into showing you how we can use that here on the actual human head, let me show you separately outside of this scene file how this tool actually works. Alright, so I'm here in a new scene and I pretty much just have one curve in here, and this curve is just drawn out using the Create Curve Tools EP Curve tool. You could also produce it through the CV Curve tool, it doesn't really matter. I'm going to go ahead and clean this up just by freezing my transforms right here, and just in case I'll kill the history, though it doesn't appear to have any. So I can actually turn this into a dynamic curve. I could come over here to NHair, Make Selected Curves Dynamic. I'll go ahead and reset this. And since we're not dealing with hair here, it's just a dynamic curve, I can go ahead and just leave it at NURBS curves. I don't have any curves to attach to a surface, or excuse me, any surface to attach these curves to. And then I can choose if it's an exact shape match. If I don't choose exact shape match, it might simplify the curve to give me less points. I'd like to keep it matching. Okay, and you can see what's happened now. I now have a nucleus. I have a follicle, but just one, of course, and I have my output curves. And if I come over here and hit play, you can see that it is a dynamic curve. Now you will see it is attached at both ends to the original curve. We can edit that by going into our follicle over here, going to the attribute editor, and I could change my point lock here to, let's say, just the base. And you'll see that the hair now, which is right there, let me highlight it, it's going to kind of fall down and swing back and forth there. We could even go ahead and jump to the nucleus here, turn on a ground plane so that it has something to collide with. So you can see it's a great way to produce things such as ropes and anything else that might need this kind of string or strand dynamics. Now, working with string, strand dynamics, rope dynamics is again also outside the scope of this course, but I wanted to show you what this tool actually does. Now, let's go ahead and jump back into our other scene. All right, here we are. So I have all of these curves, and I just want to attach them to the head, but not necessarily like the dynamics we just looked at. I want them to act the same way the curves did before when I would just use my NHair Create Hair. So to do that, I'm going to go ahead and select all my curves, and I'll deselect the eyes and the head there. And while I could attach them to this head, I'm going to choose to attach them to my low-res collide mesh right there. So I'm selecting the collide mesh after I select my hair curves. I'm then going to come up here to NHair, Make Selected Curves Dynamic, choose the option box. I'll quickly reset again. So in this case here, I'm actually going to keep it just at NURBS curves. I want to show you how we can create the paint effects separately, especially because I find sometimes it just doesn't work. If you use it here, I mean. So I'll leave it just at NURBS curves. Now I do want to attach them to the surface there. I want to make sure the surface is actually visible. So let's go ahead and bring it up there. I'm sorry, let me grab those curves one more time. Go ahead and deselect that. And now we'll go ahead and select that collide mesh. So I do want to attach them. I do want to snap the curves to the base. Oops, it doesn't seem to allow me to click that. There we go. Just seemed to be stuck. So I do want to snap the curve to the base, or the curve base to the surface rather, which means it'll make sure the hair connects. And I do want to collide with the mesh as well, and I also want the exact shape match. So I'll go ahead and make Selected Curves Dynamics, and this can take just a moment. There we go. So I can go ahead and hide my collide mesh now. And if we go ahead and hit play, you'll see that we do in fact have dynamics on all of those hairs. Now when you see this, it might look a little confusing as to what's going on here. There's curves everywhere. So there's some things we need to hide. Now the original curves are going to be found here under hair curves, so I'm just going to hit Control H to hide all those. And you can see now we're fine. Now we just have our new curves, our dynamic curves. However, you will notice they are missing the paint effects. And that's obvious. We didn't turn the paint effects on. But again, I find sometimes even if you do in this case, it just doesn't appear. However, it's really easy to apply the paint effects. I'm going to go ahead and select my hair system, come up here to N Hair, and just say Assign Paint Effects Brush to Hair. And you can see the paint effects begin to appear. In fact, I'll even hide the output curves for right now. And I'll go to a black background to make that a little easier to see. Now, they don't look all that great. There's not a whole lot of hair in there. And that's because by default, if we especially come up over here to clump and hair shape, you'll notice there's only one hair per clump. I'll increase that as high as 100, but you'll still see there's not much there. And that's because the clump width by default is at 0. So I'll go ahead and increase that, and you can see now we start to get quite a bit of hair in there. Okay. So let's quickly finish this out just by making a few adjustments here. I think I'll go ahead and increase the thinning. I'll go ahead and maybe take my bend follow down a little bit. I'll probably increase the clump width a little bit more. Maybe bring up the clump width scale to kind of separate those out. Let's see what else we want to do. I think we'll maybe add a sub-segment or two. There we go. And I might even come down over here. Maybe add a little bit of clump flatness. Definitely add some interpolation to kind of blend some of those together. I'll take that down somewhat. There we go. So those are starting to blend a little bit more. And I'll come up over here and maybe even kind of just randomly add a teeny bit of kind of curl throughout. So there's just a little bit of randomness in there. That might be too much, but I can always adjust it later. So for the most part, I think that's a decent enough start. So you can see we've added in the hair, and we did it without having to use any of the Create Hair tools. We did it with tools we used basically in other packages. In my case, ZBrush, though you could have created the curves here in Maya, or really any other software. So that's a look at how we can actually use any curves, whether they're created in another software, in Maya, wherever, and convert them into hair.